word love is kind of like that. Like when you were growing up, probably one of the first things that your parents ever said to you was that they loved you. And then we've been hearing it ever since. So mom is an actual like physical thing that you can see in front of you. Marker. And you're a little kid, you can look at it and go, marker. And I'd say marker, you go, marker. And maybe I'd even be like, blue. And maybe you could look at that and go, blue. If you had some kind of a contrast, red marker, blue marker. Now you can start learning colors. But if I then sit there and go, okay, love, but a little kid is going to hear this word over and over and over again, but it's an abstract concept, meaning that there's no physical representation of this thing in the world. That's one of the reasons that when we think about love, we want people to show that they love us and not just say it, because there is no physical representation of it. So how can you possibly know if you have it? Like I know if I have a green marker, it's right here in my hands. I can look at it. And what's worse is someone can take it away from me. And when someone takes it away from me though, I now know I don't have a green marker. When you have a person's love, how do you know? If the person takes their love away, how long can you be in a relationship with a person before you even realize that they don't love you anymore? Incredibly, it's one of the most, if not the most important thing to us. And yet, ironically or paradoxically, it's the thing that we just can't see. And so there's something, by the way, really, really important there about humans and about the way that we function at this almost like spiritual level, where the things that are really important to us are not the things that we can see, it's the things that we can't see. So now this starts to sound like love is something that you do. So in other words, maybe it's not just a feeling, but it can be more than a feeling. Okay. Good. Others. That's a hard word, man. Because we use it all the time. And if you remember that story we've gone over before about the fish swimming in the water, and if you were to ask a fish, how's the water, the fish wouldn't know how to answer that because the fish is just used to being in the water. So they don't even notice the water. It'd be like if I were to ask you about the air. How's the air? You know, you might be saying like, I don't know, polluted, but you wouldn't even know that it was polluted. You probably only see like in the distance. In other words, you wouldn't even recognize it if it was right around you because we just don't notice that stuff. You might be like, you mean like, has it smell? No. I'm not asking about a smell, I'm asking about the air itself. Like when you smell something, it's an aroma that's going through the air. If I were to ask you what's the air itself, we would probably just get frustrated and quit trying to answer that question. Thank goodness there are people who, like scientists who do work to try to answer those kinds of questions because it turns out to be absolutely necessary to our understandings of a lot of atmospheric sciences. But most of us, that's one of the things, by the way, that makes a great researcher a great researcher. They're able to answer obvious questions that to the rest of us just seem so obvious, but we can't answer them. And like the word love is kind of like that. Like when you were growing up, probably one of the first things that your parents ever said to you was that they loved you. And so I mean that like you're like minutes old, and they may have held you and said, I love you. And so that might be one of the first words that you heard outside of the womb. And then we've been hearing it ever since. And even like when you're a little kid, you're I don't know, like a year old or so, and your mom's trying to, when do kids start talking? How old is that? 1 year. Okay, so around 1 year old, that's probably the thing you're trying to get them to say, like mama, love, because you want to kind of reaffirm that. They don't really know what that word means even, either mama or love. Actually, mama they might understand, because mama is an actual, that's fascinating. So mama is an actual like physical thing that you can see in front of you. Like if I were to say marker, and you're a little kid, you could look at it and go marker, and then let's just say you could form that word, and I'd say marker, you go marker, and maybe I'd even be like blue, and maybe you could look at that and go blue. If you had some kind of a contrast, red marker, blue marker. Now you can start learning colors. But if I then sit there and go, okay, love, anger, huh? You can make faces even for anger, happy, but you can't really make a face for love. You could maybe make a little heart shape or something like that, but a little kid is going to hear this word over and over and over again, but it's an abstract concept, meaning that there's no physical representation of this thing in the world. That's one of the reasons that when we think about love, we want people to show that they love us and not just say it, because there is no physical representation of it. So how can you possibly know if you have it? Like, I know if I have a green marker, it's right here in my hands. I can look at it. And what's worse is someone can take it away from me. And when someone takes it away from me, though, I now know I don't have a green marker. When you have a person's love, how do you know? You can't see it. If the person takes their love away, how long can you be in a relationship with a person before you even realize that they don't love you anymore? It's hard to know because you can't see the thing physically. And so we become obsessed with this idea of how to show this thing, because incredibly, it's one of the most, if not the most important thing to us. And yet, ironically or paradoxically, it's the thing that we just can't see. And so there's something, by the way, really, really important there about humans and about the way that we function at this almost like spiritual level, where the things that are really important to us are not the things that we can see. It's the things that we can't see. Something like love, you can't see it. You can see maybe how it manifests. It's kind of like looking out into space and looking for black holes. You can't see a black hole. I mean, by its very nature, it's black and it's against a black backdrop. But you can see the effects of it. In other words, you can see time-space bend a little bit. You can see it warp just a little bit. And then you can look and go, there's a black hole there. I can't see it, but I can see the effects of it. If you walked in here and were like, I would say, I bet you're sick. How'd you know? I can't see little germs running around on you, but I can hear that you're sniffling and you're coughing, and that's the symptom of this physical thing, but a thing I cannot see. And so we can think of love like that, right? We can think of status, by the way, it's like that too. Like, love matters to us, status matters to us. If I were to ask you what status is, you could probably maybe describe it to me. But how would you know that a person has status? Well, you'd see their cars, you'd see their house, you'd see their money. In other words, if that's how it is that you measure it. And that's why it's important to figure out this thing here, to figure out what it means. Because once we know what it means, now we'll start to be able to do it, and then we'll be able to recognize it, and then we'll be able to recognize what it really looks like in our own lives. I have someone who's I guess they used to be close friends of mine, not so much anymore. But it's a couple, and they've only been together for like a little bit over a year, and I don't know how to say it any other way except that they engage in domestic violence. And I've talked to the guy who was a friend of mine about it, and he just says, no, that's just kind of how we show our love. And both of them, surprise, surprise, come from bad backgrounds, domestic violence, all that in their backgrounds. And they really think that that's how it is that you were to show love. And as I've tried talking to him and asked him, what is this thing? He goes, that's the thing, man. You always get so philosophical about stuff. You just have to kind of go through life and feel it. I'm like, yeah, feel the punches on your face, I guess. You can feel that. You can feel the cops showing up and slapping the cuffs on your wrists and changing your life forever. You can feel that stuff too. But the idea is that if you don't know what a thing is, then you won't even know that you have it. It's like if I were to tell a little kid who's never seen a marker before to go get a marker, they'd have no idea what I was talking about. And in fact, they could be holding a marker in their hand at that moment, and they wouldn't even know that they had a marker because they wouldn't know what the thing is. And love can be like that. You might have someone's love, and you may not even realize it because you don't know you don't understand what the thing is, how to define it, how to understand it. You can have a thing and not understand it. And when you can give a chimp a nuclear weapon, you won't have any concept of its power. You won't have any concept of its destruction, its destructive capabilities, but they can have it, they can understand it. They can understand they have something, but not know what it is. And so in order to understand what love is, in order to understand if we have it or not, We have to know what it is, and then we can see it. Then we can see its symptoms. Because if like our idea of love is that, well, people just cheat on each other all the time, it's just what happens, and then people always say this thing of like, at the end of the day, we come back together. Why do we have to wait till the end of the day for things to get good? What does that tell you about the rest of the day? I always worry about people who say that all the time. Dude, you know what? At the end of the day, oh my God, what about the rest of the day? Does the morning have to be a tragedy? Does the afternoon have to be a tragedy? So that before you go to bed, you can just go, you know what? It's just late, let's just rest and let's just drop things. Because at the end of the day, I guess that's how we're going to end up. It's hard to, I do say I don't judge the day until the night, but you can't, you can't look back at a day of tragedy and say, but you know what? The blankets are warm. And so at the end of the day, at least we're comfortable here. Now, people who get caught up on the end of the day, I tend to find have really bad rest of their days. But if you're thinking like at the end of the day, we come back together again. At the end of the day, we end up being loyal to. At the end of the day, well then again, man, that's a lot of tragedy that you're having to cover up with at the end of the day, which, by the way, if we call it what it is, it's really just another word for settling. And so first we have to know really what love is. And in English, it makes it very difficult. Because if I were to tell you that, I love buffalo wings, you would just kind of understand. That just means that you like it a lot. If I were to tell you that I love my girlfriend, if I told you that I love my mom, hopefully you understand that I love my mom and my girlfriend very differently. I guess unless you live in Kentucky. Hopefully you understand that, yeah. Hopefully you understand there's a difference in those two types of love. But in English, we just have that one word, love, which becomes problematic for us. Because now how do I express those differences and how I feel about one person versus another? How do you explain the difference between the love that you have for your friends and the love that you have for your family? And at least in Spanish, you've got two different words, which it's important because people will sometimes use them as though they're interchangeable, but they're really not. So you've got te quiero, which means, like, quite literally what?
I don't know.
No, quite literally doesn't mean that.
I like you.
Not even that. If I say that I quiero something, what am I saying? I want something. There's a difference between having like a love for something, an emotion for something, and wanting somebody or something. And then you can say te amo, which is more like I love. There's a difference there between I want you and I love you. But if we don't understand that difference, we can start to confuse the two. That just because somebody wants you means that they love you. No, far from it. Sometimes people want something very different from you. They want something that you represent or something that you provide, but they don't want you. And in Greek, there's a few different words in Greek, which work out pretty well. The first Greek word is called phileo, and I'm sorry, that's not right. Sorry. I got ahead of myself. The first one is called Eros, E-R-O-S, and that's more of like essential type of a love. That's kind of like when you first meet somebody and you're like, infatuated with them, and it's like essential, like you find them attractive and all that, and it's exciting. That's called Eros. We get the word erotic from that. After that, you've got a word called, that's where you get phileo. And that's more of like a friendship type of a love. When you're friends with people, you love your friends. That's what you are. And after that, you've got this other one called Stargate, which is more of like a family love. It's the love that you have among family members. You're so closely knit that it's your family. And then you've got this other word called agape. Sorry, that's a G. And agape is something completely different. Agape is more akin to these things over here. Agape is a verb in Greek, meaning that it's something that you do. It's not something that you feel, not an emotion. It's not duty-based, it's duty-based love. It's not, emotionally based love. And then this starts to matter, by the way. So let's say, for example, you meet somebody and you're excited, you're infatuated, you've got this Eros thing going on, and everything is great and wonderful, and you overwhelmingly feel. Then let's say you get together, and then you stay together for a little while, and then you become this thing like, phileo, which is like, you not only like each other, but you actually like each other. You're actually friends. It's not just that, you might be able to say to somebody, oh, I love you. Now, if they were to ask you, but do you like me? That might be a harder question to answer. And some people love their kids, but they don't like them. Some of us might love our parents, but not like them. Some of us might love our friends, but not like them. I mean, like them as people. Like you might have some emotional connection to them, but I wonder how many of us, if you ran into your siblings in the street and they weren't your siblings, or if you met them in a class, how many of us would be friends with our siblings? Or if we're only siblings, if we only treat them as family because we have the same DNA. I wonder. So you meet somebody, it's the excitement stage, and then you move on to actually being friends. And that's maybe you start to know you kind of know how they like their cheeseburger, for example. You can finish each other's sandwiches. And then from there, you move on to something a bit deeper, Stargate, which is more like family. You're family with people. That's kind of like you've been together for so long that now, it's like if somebody invites you to a party, they're inviting both of you. You just kind of assume that you guys are always together. It's a different kind of love. Now, the challenging thing for a lot of people is that if you start off here and then you move onto phileo, then what ends up happening is you lose a little bit of that Eros because you're more friends than you are infatuated. Now you kind of know who they are, and you still have an emotional connection to them, but it's not quite the same emotional connection that you had before. And then after a little bit more, you have this Stargate thing, which means you have a lot less of this Eros thing, but you've traded it for something better. You have less of this friendship thing, but you've traded it for something much better. And this is the idea, is that love is progressive. You trade the last stage of it for something better. And then eventually you get to this thing called Agape, which has really no translation into English from the Greek. It's entirely selfless. It's action, it's duty, it's what you do. If any of you guys have grandparents that have been married for 105 years, and maybe they argue or something like that, and you always ask them, why are you guys still together? And they're like, because that's what you do. You commit to something, you stay loyal, you stay devoted, and that's what you do. You make a promise, you see it through. That's what you do. And you can compare that to the way some people talk about love, they'll be together with someone, they'll say, I don't know, it's weird, it's like, I love them, but I'm not in love with them, if that makes sense. No, that doesn't make any sense, because you're using the same word to say that, you're saying I have this thing, but not this thing at the same time. It doesn't make sense. What you're really saying is, I don't know, it's weird, it's like we're close family, but I don't have this Eros thing anymore. Oh, it's hard to explain. Does that make sense? That way it makes sense. But just saying, I love them, but I'm not in love with them, it doesn't make as much sense. What you're really saying is that you've moved through these stages of love, and it becomes damaging if you don't understand that it progresses this way, and that it's a good thing. It's like, yeah, this is nice, and this is nice, but this is so much deeper. This is so much more permanent, so much deeper, and so much more fulfilling than anything that comes before it. And if you understand when you go into it that that's where you're headed, and that's actually a positive goal, then when you start moving through those stages, that becomes the exciting thing. And we have this concept of love that it's an emotional thing that you're supposed to feel excitement of every minute of every day for the rest of your life, but name something that gives you that. I'll save you the time, there's nothing. Even your favorite food gets tiresome if you eat it every day. Everything that you love, everything that you enjoy, to a high degree, would lose some of its appeal every day. And it's insane to go into love thinking that that's going to be any different. And ultimately, there's this thing, Agape, which is, there's no greater love that a person has than this. And the trip is, if you guys ever go to a wedding and you hear that, they always seem to read this thing at weddings. It's from the Bible. It's called 1 Corinthians 13. It's that love is kind, love is patient, love is long-suffering. You hear this all the time, and they'll read it to each other. And they'll say, love is this, love is that. Part of the problem is that when they're reading that, they're thinking of it this way. The word that's being used there is this word called agape. Non-emotional, duty-based action is long-suffering. Non-emotional, duty-based action does not keep account. That's the thing that carries you through these days. But if you go into life thinking it's always going to be this, then you're going to be sorely disappointed. And you're going to get like a divorce rate of over 50%, which is what we find. Interestingly enough, when you look at countries that have arranged marriages, their divorce rate is incredibly low. The freer that we are to kind of just dissolve those bonds immediately, the higher our divorce rate goes. So it doesn't have to be that way. You can think about it before you go in and understand where it's headed, if things go well. If things go well. So I guess first things first, what's done out of love, what's done out of one of these things, always takes place beyond good and evil. But God, that's just love. We haven't even talked about good and evil yet. Maybe another time. Questions, comments, concerns, complaints, criticisms?